We have the third panel, which is going to be another treat, I believe. Not only because of our fabulous panel of speakers, but also because of the focus of the conversation this afternoon. You know, looking at the new declaration, you'll see that it acknowledges that there's been much progress and achievement in the field of global education over the last 20 years, since GEAN was born as a new type of international intergovernmental organization, and since the Maastricht Declaration set out for the first time a European strategy in this field. So there's been lots of progress in national strategies, in policy and sector coordination, in international networking, in funding. Lots of progress too in terms of quality and in terms of reach, as global education moved from the preserve of a few to reach many people in Europe. That's all grand. That's all very fine and well. But GEAN's motto is working towards the day when all people in Europe, in solidarity with peoples globally, will have access to quality global education. So how do we move from good to great, from many to all, so that all people in Europe will have access to real quality global education? So in panel 3, we now broaden the conversation beyond the usual suspects, beyond those already committed. How do we do that? How to go beyond without losing the core values that global education espouses? So I'm delighted to welcome here today as our convener someone who's no stranger to broadening conversations and widening audiences, from his work in the Ireland Funds, inspiring the Irish diaspora to hugely increase support for causes for change and inclusion in Ireland, to his more recent role in Venturewave, focusing on encouraging impact investing in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to give a warm welcome to Kieran McLoughlin, who will lead the panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you, folks, and thank you, Liam. I must say, after an introduction like that, I can't wait to hear what I have to say. But I wouldn't get my hopes up, and I'll explain that in a moment. First of all, can I say welcome to Dublin Castle. This place famously or infamously has been at the heart of Irish history for centuries now. And look, congratulations and best wishes to all of you as you make more history in this building this week with the promulgation of the Dublin Declaration. Now, when Liam asked me to chair this panel, he said, you know, we want a freewheeling, open discussion, and we'd like somebody to chair that, a non-expert, you know, unencumbered by knowledge, a blank page. So friends, I am your blank page, okay? And with that in mind, I am absolutely thrilled that we have such an expert panel who will do justice to the subject. And I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves in a contextually sensitive manner. Panel, please, a round of applause for me. Thank you. The challenge I was given was to get the term contextually sensitive in, and I think I haven't done badly in the first 2 minutes, so we're off to a good start. So I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves in order. David McNair, Ilenia Ventroni, Libby Giles, Joe O'Hara, Marlene, Simeon, and Raresh Vashu. David, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Kieran. So my name's David. I work for a group called the One Campaign, which is a group of millions of activists around the world fighting inequality, extreme poverty, and preventable disease. And we mobilize citizens' voices to convince political leaders to make really big deals, billions of dollars, transformative policy change to make that happen.
Thank you. I'm Ilenia Ventroni from Solidar Foundation. I'm the Education and Lifelong Learning Policy Officer, and Solidar Foundation has around 55 members across Europe and across the world, and who all work for a lifelong and life-wide learning in a perspective of climate and social justice, so for just transition, and for progressive and citizenship education.
Tēnā koutou e te whānau. He uri ahau no Airini no Aotearoa. Ki tamaki makaurau ahau e noho ana. He kai hautu ahau mo arahaina te ao. Ko Libby tōku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I've just told you a little bit about my background. I come from New Zealand. My ancestors come from Ireland and New Zealand. I am an education leader in global citizenship education. My name is Libby. I welcome all of you, all of us. And my mihi goes to the people of this land, past, present, and future, and to all of our global whānau here. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Joe O'Hara. I'm the current president of the European Educational Research Association. We're an association of 42 associations from 37 countries with 33 academic networks representing about 20,000 members. As our core idea, we engage in high-quality educational research for the benefit of society. And as part of that mission, over the last 3 years, we've been working with GE to fund original and innovative educational research in the area of global education that connects to the wider European educational research community. And it's been a very successful and interesting set of projects. So thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Marlene Simeon. I work at the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, CMR, and also I'm the director of PLATFORMA, which is a pan-European network of local and regional governments, their representative associations at national level, at European level, and at global level. And we are all engaged into development cooperation and decentralized cooperation, so city to city, region to region cooperation. We are policymakers as local and regional governments. We are implementers as well, and we are gatherers as well of local communities. In 2021, actually, we signed a memorandum of understanding with GE. So today we are very pleased to have been involved in the process to the declaration and also to be here today. So thank you very much.
What a panel, right? How am I supposed to measure up to these people? But hello, everyone. I'm going to do my best. My name is Giles, Voicu. I'm 20 years old, and I'm a board member of OBESSU, which is the Organizing Bureau of European School Student Unions, a very long name, which is the reason why I go by OBESSU. And what we do is represent school students, upper secondary school students from all over Europe. And we represent over 30 school student organizations and students' councils from all over Europe. So we bring the voice of school students to the center of policymaking. We try to give a voice to the voiceless, and we empower our peers to take a stand, take action, and use their voice.
Well, Waishu said it best. What a panel. Please give our panel a round of applause. Thank you so much. So we're going to engage in a fairly freewheeling conversation now and touch upon as many high-level issues as we can. And if we have time at the end, we'd very much welcome questions from the floor. So if we may, we'll crack on. And the first topic for discussion is about the state of the world, really. I mean, the purpose of the Dublin Declaration, the very objective of GE is to promote ESG values, the UN SDGs, to create better participation, equality, access, etc. But again, the starting point has to be the state of the world, because that is the canvas upon which all the work has to be filled in and determines just how much work has to be done. So now, as we come to the end of 2022, what is your impression, David, of the state of the world? A very easy, nice opener for you.
I mean, I think it feels to us all that it's out of control. You know, a friend of mine said, it feels like you're on a whitewater raft and you're about to be knocked off. We've got war in Europe for the first time in a generation with a threat of nuclear attack. We've got forest fires all over the place. And I think that's incredibly disempowering for people and disconcerting. And one of the things that we have found is that if you can explain what's driving these trends, explain who the decision makers are and the moments that they make decisions, and help them understand their agency and their voice within that, it's actually a very, very empowering thing, and it helps people feel like they've got something to say, that their voice matters, and that they can have an impact, not just for their own lives, but for lots of other people's lives. But the one thing that we've learned over the past couple of years is that you need to meet people where they are at. A friend of mine who works in advertising said to me that the average person sees 10,000 adverts a day, 10,000. And we're in this kind of ever intensifying competition for what I think is the most valuable thing in the world, which is people's attention. And what we were doing a couple of years ago was, writing these like very detailed, long reports, and we kind of assumed that if we were like smart enough and expert enough, people would pay attention, and it's just not true. You need to be part of conversations. And so I spent months writing this report, and we looked at the download statistics on it, and 19 people had downloaded the report. It's kind of soul-destroying. So what we did instead was we kind of identified, okay, what are the moments, what are the issues, what are the conversations that people are already part of, and how can we explain those and then help people like understand their agency within it? So whenever Putin invaded Ukraine, we did this kind of data analysis of the impact on food prices in Africa, and literally thousands of people within a week were reading it. And we talked to celebrities about how they could lend their social media accounts to experts. So we had Julia Roberts give over her accounts to Anthony Fauci during the pandemic to help explain what was going on. And I think that this idea of tapping into different ways of framing issues, including using humor, because humor is a really important way of disarming people's prejudices. And a really good example of that is, we were during the pandemic, Joe Biden, the US president, committed to host this summit and to agree global targets on vaccinating the world. At the time, there were huge disparities between COVID vaccinations in rich countries and COVID vaccinations in poor countries. He said he would do it, and then he kept basically kicking the can down the road. And we couldn't get attention of the White House in terms of saying you need to prioritize this. So what we decided to do was to send the White House a doodle poll. These polls where you kind of you say here's 3 dates, can you make them? And it was done in a very kind of lighthearted, funny way. And we said, the rest of the world's available. When will you be available for these dates? And because we did it in a funny and kind of engaging way, the officials in the White House found it funny, and they talked about it in their meeting, and they made a decision as a result. Whereas all of our kind of heavy moralizing and kind of this really matters just didn't cut through. So I think meeting people where they're at, explaining this kind of crazy world that we live in, and explaining their agency within it really is essential to cutting through.
So I want to come back to that in a moment. I mean, what you're describing a world which means that the work that's being done here is more urgent than ever before. And I want to come back on messaging, and particularly the importance of humour. It is extraordinary to think that the bravest, most courageous statesman in the world today is a former comedian, when you think about that. So can I ask the rest of the panel in no particular order? Dave's given us a very broad picture. Any impressions? I mean, Libby, you come from the other side of the world.
Okay.
What's your impression of the state of?
Well, I think to say that we're in turmoil is such an understatement. I was just recalling a conversation I had with somebody who's spent a lot of time in the United Nations and in government and so on. 2016, we were having this conversation. We'd been talking about climate change and threat of nuclear war and so on. And I said afterwards, this is, quite depressing, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it's as if it's 1910 and we're jolly Edwardians not knowing what's around the corner. And I think back to that quite often. That was 2016. And I look at what's now, and I know that what we're doing is more important now than it ever was. I also think back to when I was at school, and the threat of nuclear war seemed to be the really, really biggest thing. And a friend of mine said that she'd said to her father, are we all going to die from nuclear war? And he said, well, do you know what? There's a lot of people, really good people, working really hard to solve these problems. And she's one of them now, and all of us here, we're one of them. So I think that we really, really need to be passing on that power to young people and older people, actually, because one of our, a huge problem that we have, of course, is misinformation. And, you don't have to be a child to be vulnerable to that. I think what we have the opportunity here for, though, we have this kind of added layer of stress that's to do with the state of the world. No matter how optimistic we might be, there is this kind of, is this it? Is this the end of the world? It's framed by climate change and so on. So we have this incredible opportunity to embed global citizenship that is about critical thinking, it's about well-being, it's about understanding, knowing, and all of those kinds of things, but we can't do it by tinkering around the edges with the systems that we've got. This actually must mark a significant shift in thinking. So if we don't do that, then...
Marlene, I mean, you're a citizen of a major power in Europe. a member of the Security Council, etc., crucially important former of ideas, etc. You know, the direction of French politics has a great effect, not just regionally, but internationally, etc. What do you feel about where the world is today?
Yes, for us, it's a challenging time in our municipalities and regions at territorial level, because there is the impact, of course, of the war in Ukraine, with an increase, for instance, on the energy prices, even at school. If we come back also to education, it means also for local governments who have often the competencies to provide the infrastructure and the care in school and meals, for instance, it has an impact as well. There are many challenges that are felt in our municipalities and regions. And now we feel that people want to contribute to the solution. It's not us alone or the national government alone that will find and provide the solution. It has to be co-designed with people. And what we try to do is to have different approaches as well in engaging and allowing the space for people to contribute. And now I'm sitting next to a young a representative, but what we are working on, for instance, is this how to facilitate young people participation in local life, in public life, in politics as well at local level. This is often the first democratic exercise for them. So it's important also to give this space and to offer this space to form and to shape the future society that we want to live in. So I would say, yes, we have different challenges, both in terms of infrastructure in municipalities and regions, with the shrinking also local finances, with the pandemics, now with the energy prices, with many, the transition that we need to do in terms of green transition, digital transition, but it relies also in our competencies, in our responsibility to offer a good quality of life to the people. So we act on different levels or different levers. We work a lot, for instance, in non-formal education as well. So it means with local public libraries, for instance, with youth organizations, with a museum as well. So it's how to reach the people where they are and not the usual suspects as well. How to reach those that are not used to participate in the public life.
So I think that's a hugely important point. So again, to summarize the contribution so far, challenging world, difficult world under stress, but a world in which agency and connectivity must be enhanced and people must be encouraged to participate more, which again, I think just underscores the importance of everything that's happening here in the Dublin Declaration. If I may, in terms of WASHU, I want to come to you now. Libby mentioned social media. How do educationalists struggle to be heard in a world where truth is so contested, alternative facts are offered, people live in silos, you know, information streams are so segmented? How can you get a quality educative message out there against all that clamour and that noise? WASHU, what do you think?
So I first wanted to ask all of you, because I've been scratching my head since you asked the question about the state of the world today. It's a very big question, right? But I want to ask all of you, when you first heard that question, what's the state of the world today? What's the first thing that came into your mind? Ugh, right? Like, what's going on? It's insane, it's bad, it's polarized. And yeah, a part of me wants to agree with what you're saying. But my question is, why do we see it this way? Is there any single person in this room, and please put your hand up, who when you heard that question, they said, oh, it's pretty fine actually, I'm doing great. Anyone? Great. So a very significant percent of the population, I see. But so the point is that I feel like maybe sometimes due to social media or through social media or all of these channels that attack us with information, we always feel like we're trapped in this, you know, very bad, very dark world, you know, when actually, if you just take a quick history lesson, you're going to see that history has thrown quite a couple of things at us that we've survived, you know? Nuclear conflicts. We've had, I don't know, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest time we've ever been to having an actual nuclear conflict, you know? Like, we've, without trying to downplay, of course, any of the experiences going right now, we've had worse before. We've had all of these bad things happen before. So I think it's important to, while of course being very conscious of what's going on right now, to not lose our hope. You know, because it's very easy to get lost in all of this darkness and all of this hopelessness and so on. And indeed, social media contributes so much to that. And we've seen, especially, I hate hearing this and saying this, but especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a lot of fake news and a lot of false information and so on, which was spread with the help or through social media. And I feel like some people fell for it. And it's getting very, very clear that some of the public messaging was wrong and people accepted it as it was. And the first thing that comes to my mind when we think about how we can combat it is of course maybe media education or media training or media literacy, competencies or skills acquiring and so on. But at the end of the day, I think it's, you know, you can get false information, but at the end of the day, it's all about the outlook you have on the world. And with the experiences you have and with the perspectives you have, the way in which, you know, you see the world and the outlook that you have. So I would say that, you know, because your question related to social media and to how we reach more people, and I'd say that, of course, we're very, very polarized, right? So we live in a very polarized society. The struggles that we face differ so much from the global north to the global south. And many of the things that happen in the global south affect in the global north, affect the global south without necessarily a very direct link, such as climate change, we see, for example. So I feel like all of this gets to us through social media, which is good because we become aware, but it's so easy to be overwhelmed by all of it. So maybe the best way of limiting the spread of false information and limiting this very dark outlook on the world that we sometimes have is just taking a break from it all, right? It's a great instrument, but let's not overuse it.
Well said, sir. And you mentioned, David, trend lines. Bill Clinton always says, forget the headlines, look at the trend lines. And the fact is, objectively, statistically, never have human beings been better educated, better nourished, or living longer. So again, as a species, and I think our response to the pandemic proved it, it's not all bad news, far from it. But if I may just go back to, and again, we're better educated than ever before, and that surely is the key to building a more sustainable future. David, if I may go, sorry, Joe, excuse me, back to that point about how does one break through all the noise, all the clamour as educationalists? I mean, your work on a pan-European basis, what's it telling you?
I think the first thing is to go to your point of a second. It's the narcissism of the present moment. We think we sort of focus on ourselves and say, this is the, whatever it is, best, worst. And to pick up on Raresh's point as well, it's not the best or it's not the worst. So we need to do what the Global Declaration says, which is create space for critical reflection. And that is a core point within this. Because I think what the last couple of years has shown us is that we're living in a period of incredible acceleration. And that acceleration is driven at a conceptual level and a level of ideas by things like social media. It's driven by a communications culture and a broader global culture that is around clicks, and it's about getting a simple idea out quickly, which then drives more reaction and a quicker reaction. And I'm always reminded of my grandmother's favourite phrase, which was, the more the haste, the less the speed. Okay? The idea that if we're driven into this constant chasing after the new thing, and I'm talking about this as a researcher, we're in danger of actually losing our capacity to reflect and to create space for ideas, meaningful ideas, and ideas that will be impactful to emerge. So I think that's a really important point. And I think connected to that really important point is the whole idea about how do we actually go about that. And this is picking up on Marlene's point, I think, as well, Marlene's point, about the importance of context and the importance of rather having meta-narratives, big ideas that we push at a global level. We become, as researchers, humble. And we go and ask people, whatever community they are, whoever it is, well, what's your solution? What are you doing? What do you think is a meaningful response to what's an inherently, or it appears to be, an inherently unstable world? And I think if we as researchers and as thought leaders, to use that terrible phrase, can build in that humility and can build in that contextually sensitive approach to thinking about what does it mean to create knowledge and to engage with knowledge, we then can create contextually specific responses to contextually specific problems. And out of those, I would suggest, we may get global solutions. I have a great fear of the great idea of the policy mobility, where a policy is created somewhere in the ether and then lands. And then you say, right, here's your solution. Now we know, we've told you, we've thought about this in our great think tank or our great research association, and this is all you need to do now, and all problems will be solved. Yeah. It's not the way it works, and I think we need to have that humility. And I think also we need, and I heard this phrase last week, in education we need to create systems that allow our students at whatever level they're at, from early childhood all the way through to informal and postgraduate education, to live in an unscripted world. We don't have a script anymore. And we need to become comfortable with that. And again, going back to the declaration, at the center of that is the ability to reflect and think critically about the reality that you're engaging with. If you can do that, then many of the problems we face at least are conceptualized and maybe surmountable. It won't be easy, but it's possible. So that's right.
1-1 on the conceptual sensibility, by the way. Yes, well done. So you made two fascinating points, and I want to come back to the lack of a script in a moment. But what you're talking about is listening to people, reflecting their individual experience and learning from that. And the paradox is that the much derided technology provides the means for that. It makes it easier for people to participate and to access people and to hear and analyze and propagate their ideas. So Ilenia, how, again, in the world of education, can one harness technology for innovation?
Thank you for this question, because I feel like this all kind of ties up with everything we've been saying. I'm kind of with Raresh on this, in the sense that we do need to contextualize. Yet on the other hand, I think that David and Marlene were really right in saying we need to listen to people. And people right now are scared, are a bit more scared than before. And one good way to really make our work meaningful is to make also people understand that we want to hear from them. That we're not just there to say we're going to tick the box and make them feel heard, and what does that mean? So going back to community, when I think about our member organizations, they are deeply rooted in communities. Their work is really from the ground up. And this is really easy to forget when you work in Brussels, where we're really all trying to look at the global view. And we talk a lot about digital education. So this was really thrown onto the table during the, I'm going to say the horrible word, the pandemic. So that was really on the table, and it really pushed really hard, especially small communities and cities and city councils that had to, come up with equipment. And talking about meeting people where they are, there's a lot of people who did not have any access to any digital means to have access to their basic, even formal education, their children in schools, literally. And in that moment, really, there was, in that moment where even those who did not know how to use digital tools had to, take the fast road. And then it was clear for many people that there were two sides of the issue. We really got that from talking to our member organizations who are rooted in communities. On one side, the digital side allowed people to maybe participate even more. So when they cannot travel, they could access maybe intranational and cross-national sharings. And on the other hand, this was not the same. We talk about non-formal education. It's really hard to translate non-formal education on the digital side. On the other hand, though, access is so important. It was said in a panel before, earlier on, I think it was Dervla from the Adult Education Organization here in Ireland, and she said, it's really all well and good to talk about global citizenship education and take it from, the upside, as Joe was saying, making it land down on people. That cannot be the way, because in the moment where, you manage to finally access people, and maybe you can do that in a digital way through social media, or maybe, with a Zoom meeting or whichever, or from a streaming with a conference. And then people really are not talking about something that is present and really urgent to them. And what it was said is that really you need to meet people where they are, and you need to answer people's questions about what is urgent right now, and not to minimize them. On the other hand, that's really the place where maybe when people are given the space and the time, maybe they won't focus on the current war or on the nuclear threat. Maybe they will focus much more on the challenges of their communities, from putting food on the table to, which are the facilities that my children face when they go into school, to the level of, how are people coping with the job environment. Like when we talk about just transition, there is a climate change policy that we're trying to implement that means massive shifts for jobs. What does that leave for people? And there's so many balls up in the air to try to keep everyone in a place of leading a decent, happy life, and having access to quality education is part of that. But I think having the space to go back to communities, and to do that, really sometimes also the digital way can be the best way. But it's a double-edged sword. When we talked about that, in our policy paper on the commodification of education. There was a lot of edutech involved during the pandemic, and they sometimes offered digital platforms, or also digital means for people to to engage in digital education. But that has also shifted the topics sometimes of education. We talk a lot about, for us, I think everyone in the room, it's more important to form learners and citizens rather than just workers. And yet, in the speech of Ursula von der Leyen, the State of the Union of the EU, there was a talk about skills, and so everyone was like, wow, education is there, it's on the table. Skills for jobs. Europe needs workers. Europe needs learners and citizens who are empowered every day for every means possible, and it cannot be from a top-down approach.
So there's so much in what you're saying. Education is a process rather than an absolute, et cetera, et cetera. What's the purpose of education? Enrichment of life, or just preparations for a career? But there are two key themes of relevance, I think, coming out of what both you and Joe have said. The first is that the discussion must be locally based. It must be relevant to people in their community. And secondly, Joe made the statement, there is no accepted script any longer, no singular script. How does one reconcile those realities with the overarching ambition of the Dublin Declaration to introduce quality education across Europe? It's a very noble aim, it's a very correct and it's an essential aim, but how does one take that global aim across the continent, where look at the differing experiences from the Atlantic to the Urals, God bless us, our compatriots in Ukraine and that. How does one make that reality? David, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, coming back to technology is a tool, and tools can be used to include and they can be used to exclude. So making sure that people have access to relevant content, that it's affordable, that even they have access to energy, which is not so much an issue in Europe, but there are 600 million people in Africa that don't have access to reliable energy. So, if you're talking about, technological tools to participate in democratic processes or in education, there are a lot of people specifically, and particularly women, who are just basically locked out of that. So I think that's a fundamental issue. But the other thing that I think is really important here is, we've talked a lot about local context, and I think you get better solutions whenever you involve the people who are impacted by something in designing that solution. But we also need to look at that at a macro level. So on the 15th of November, in a couple of weeks' time, the G20 is going to meet in Bali, the world's economic leaders. On the same day, the population of our world will hit 8 billion, and there are 3.8 billion people who are not represented at that meeting. So I think we need to think about, it gets back to Marlene's point about Ursula von der Leyen. She has a very, I know because I work with lots of people who work with her, she has a very close-knit set of advisors who aren't necessarily taking the perspectives and the nuance that is kind of out there to build into the speeches that she's making. And we need to find ways of generating a political signal and a demand that inclusivity and that inclusion really matters, not for the sake of it or because it sounds good, but actually because you get better solutions as a result.
And drawing on that theme, Libby, of course, your work is in lifelong learning, etc. Again, how do you promulgate a consistent set of educational experiences across the age range, across cohorts?
With great difficulty.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we're all trying to do. I was just thinking with digital education, and since the P word, going to school at all seems to have become optional for a lot of people. There's a lot of, well, I can just do that online, and parents are busy, they're rushing off to work or doing whatever, and it's really, really hard. So having to meet people where they are is hugely important. And also, we need to be much more nimble and disruptive in the way that we're working as well. So the ways that people are gaining information are different and changing all the time. And we need to be able to give people, the adults and children, the tools to navigate that kind of information. And I think, we need some basic philosophical inquiry there. We need to ask questions. How do I know what's real?
Yeah.
What's my responsibility when I do find out the truth, and those kinds of things. The exact how you do that with consistency, I'll let you know when I find out.
Well, great. We've got 5 minutes. And Marlene, the same question on a regional basis again. I mean, this is the work you've done, Association of Regions and Municipalities across Europe. How does one find a consistent message across vastly different areas and cohorts?
Yes, for us, actually, we have embraced the 2030 agenda. So there is no script, but we have the common goals, and we want to be achieved by 2030. So there is an immediate emergency also to achieve this agenda now. And this is where also we are linking the 2030 agenda as a common language with partners. So it means that we have also developed international partnerships to discuss how to achieve this agenda, how to bring the citizens in this agenda and to explain this agenda, how we can make it a reality in our municipalities and territories. So sometimes we select a common SDGs between a partner country, a partner municipality, and a European municipality, and we discuss about action plans, how we can develop those action plans with the people. We also have the other side where global education is really part of those partnerships. If you don't explain to people why you are spending time and money in the end on those partnerships, it will not work either. So it's really about coming together on achieving this agenda and keeping it in our main objective for the next years. So twinning and international partnerships are really part also of the global education for us. So this is how we also get a common approach at European level between municipalities and regions. This agenda, which is about integrating policies at local level, 60% of the goal will not be achieved if local governments are not involved, according to the OECD. And this is also something that brings us together, and it's a common movement to achieve this 2030 agenda.
So a common approach, recognizing regional differences with individual experiences being heard and respected, using technology to its best capacity to advance that. I think that's, if all of those things happen, Raresh, let me ask you, 2050, what does success look like? What will, in your mind, how will the Dublin Declaration fulfill itself by 2050?
So the point of it is to get the message across, right? Is to mainstream global education, is to teach young people about global education, to teach them life skills through global education. And we in the youth group leading up to the Congress and who helped draft the declaration, we made a survey, and we asked young people if they had ever heard of global education, if we're just insane, like, are we just doing this for ourselves? Does anyone actually care about it? So to calm ourselves down, we did the survey, and 76% of our respondents said that they interacted with global education at least once in their lifetimes. So what we're doing is working. We're not doing this in vain. We are creating change. So I think that in 2050, maybe let's not bump it up to 100%, because that's very hard to achieve, isn't it? But let's try maybe at least a 90%. Let's try to actually mainstream this. Let's try to have anyone at least understand what it means, because it's such a big word. And about the ways in which we do it, we're at 76%, so we must be doing something right. At OBESSU as well, we organize activities, we bring young people together, we give them a voice, and so on. So we're all doing this. But the main theme of today is we're doing good, and the question was, how do we make it better? We reach out to some, but how do we reach out to all? And I think the key, what we need to understand here, and maybe my central message, is that we hear so often that GE equips us to become global citizens, and it teaches us solidarity and to look outside of our bubble and to understand others. But I think it also provides us with a very valuable lesson of introspection and looking towards ourselves. And someone said it teaches empathy. And I agree with that, but not in the sense that, we pity the poor and the disheveled and the ones who are maybe not as privileged as us. Because empathy is not about pity. It's about empowerment. It's about telling people that what the other, whoever or whatever that might be, is feeling, experiencing, is valid. And this is hella hard to teach, isn't it? Like in a classroom, you cannot just teach people genuine human interactions.
How could you be pessimistic with Raresh in the room? Well done, sir. Beautiful. Now, Joe, same question to you, because we're coming to the end here. Success, what does success look like in 2050?
I don't know, because I probably won't be here in 2050. I don't know. But so
How contextually sensitive.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think, so I think it's Raresh's perspective is probably far more valid than mine at one level. But at another level, I think what we do need to think about is it's about the values, it's about the principles, and about the ideas that are embedded in the declaration that we would hope will suffuse education. And I think that I would have great hope that that will be the case. To go back very briefly to the pandemic, one of the fascinating things that we saw in the pandemic was that as soon as we had that catastrophe hit us, we saw educators transition into action and do things nobody knew they could do. I don't think they knew they could do it themselves. Yeah. So it was a fascinating thing. And that was built on their agency, their capacity to say, I am capable of doing this. And I think we need to embed this at all levels of our education system. We had a profoundly wonderful presentation from our colleagues earlier on from Ukraine in one of the groups. And they spoke about the wounded education system. And they spoke about the way in which they, as researchers and practitioners, are reacting to that, and how they're reacting to the fact that one of the implications of the assault, the Russian assault on power infrastructure is sort of online learning is now exceptionally difficult within Ukraine. So now there's new ways of people are reacting to that in a way that allows them continue to educate and continue to create that sense of community and to continue to be hopeful. And ultimately, I think that's what we need to think out of the Global Declaration. It is a hopeful document. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to always hold on to. It's possible to be pessimistic. It's better to be hopeful.
Yeah. Elena, would you agree?
Definitely, yeah. Recently, we've been in Zagreb to talk about peace education, which for us is an iteration of global citizenship education. And we got a very poignant question asked from one of our amazing hosts who have very long and deep experience, the Center for Peace Studies in Zagreb. And they said, is it too late to bring a paper on peace education? And the answer here I say is like, never. It's a living process, and I think our goal to 2050 is reaching more and more people, bringing the Dublin Declaration far and wide, and not treat it as a goal or a means to an end, but simply as a living document, and making really people feel like it's theirs, and they can take it in their communities and make it theirs, and make it more present and more alive than ever.
Look, I think that's a wonderful rallying cry to end on. I'm going to close with a closing statement of my own. This blank page is now full of ideas and thoughts informed by this very, very rich panel. I also be absolutely optimistic. Libby, would you like to add to that? Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I actually would like to add something that we haven't talked about. And, what we're talking about here is being decent human beings, learning to live together and a life worth living. Global citizenship is not new. Indigenous peoples and ancient civilizations have always known this. The blueprints have been around forever. And I think that, we can look back and learn from them. This is not about overseas. It's not about, being international do-gooders or jet-setters and working and all being winners in Asia or wherever we might be working. But it's about our own sense of identity and belonging and connectedness. Socrates said, "I'm a citizen of the world." He didn't go anywhere, but he did know how to question. He did know how to challenge the status quo, and that's what we need to be doing as well.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put, and I think that underscores not just the importance, but the philosophy, if I may say, the whole impulse of what this conference is about. I am privileged to be involved. I think this panel has been outstanding in the depth and thought that they have presented to us. I wish you the very, very best with your critically important and profoundly hopeful work. Again, please show your appreciation of the panel. Thank you.